From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good morning, Burnaby. I'm Richard Davis. Here's what's making news at 12 o'clock. The BC Ministry of Agriculture and Food just announced that a $15.5 million fund to strengthen the food supply for people in rural and Indigenous communities. Our reporter, Alicia Nolasco, has more details about this fund.
The Food Affordability and Innovation Fund that is going towards the new BC Food Storage, Distribution, and Retail Program is helping recipients improve regional distribution networks and shared storage capacity. This includes reducing costs in facilities, transportation, and implementation of new technology. The investment is aiming to increase food security and support BC's rural independent grocery store operators. The Minister of Agriculture says that this will help with the local economy and affordability in the province. Alicia Nolasco, 1680, The Crow.
Last night, the Vancouver City Council had a vote to increase multiple license fees. Our reporter, Riley Leung, has the story.
On Wednesday, the City Council has proposed and voted on increasing business licensing fees, residential parking permit fees, and more. The most significant one is the short-term rental license, which will see an increase from $109 to a staggering $1,000. Though not finalized, the increase in licensing fees will be in Vancouver's 2024 budget plan. Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim explained that the increases were necessary to not up property taxes. The additional revenue will generate an extra $15.2 million for the city, making up a 1.4% property tax increase. Riley Leung, 1680 The Crow.
Now, Riley is actually in studio with us now. So can you tell me what the largest categories are in Vancouver's budget?
Thank you, Richard. In 2023, Vancouver has an operating budget of close to $2 billion. $344 million goes towards the Vancouver's police, and $200 million goes towards Vancouver's homeless problem.
So do you know why Vancouver is increasing these fees?
Well, Mayor Ken Sim says that Vancouver is running on a $500 million deficit per year. And Vancouver needs more money, so without raising property taxes again, the City Council has decided to increase its licensing fees.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Riley. RCMP and Chilliwack say they are investigating a double homicide. A statement from the Upper Fraser Valley Regional Detachment says officers were called to reports of shots fired in a rural area south of the city on Wednesday night. It says 2 people were found dead in a nearby home in the 46,000 block of Chilliwack Lake Road. The suspect was found in the same area and is now in custody. Neither the victims nor the suspect have been identified, and police say no further details will be immediately provided. They said the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, or IHIT, is working with Chilliwack RCMP, and there is no risk to the public. The RCMP say they've arrested a youth after a bear spray attack on a Sikh teenager who was riding a bus in Kelowna, BC. Corporal Michael Gauthier with Kelowna RCMP says in a statement that video shows the suspect assaulting and spraying the victim during an attack that took place both on and off a BC Transit bus on Monday. Gauthier says the suspect remains in custody and is scheduled to appear in court Thursday for a bail hearing. In a previous statement, the Kelowna detachment said the 17-year-old Sikh student had been attacked by another teenage male, and the motive was unknown. The World Sikh Organization of Canada issued a statement saying it was deeply concerned by the incident. The second alleged attack on a Sikh student riding a bus in Kelowna this year. In March, Kelowna RCMP said a Sikh international student was hit from behind as he got off the bus, and hate crime investigators were being consulted. Now, federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is in Vancouver as he continues a swing through BC that will see him visit 2 Northwest Coast cities later today and make a stop in the Yukon tomorrow. He says he'll bring a proposal to Parliament on Monday that offers a mathematical formula tying federal funding to home construction across Canada.
You increase home building 1% above the target, you get a 1% increase in your federal infrastructure money. You come in at 1% below the target, you get a 1% reduction. So it is a scalable incentive that gets the local government gatekeepers out of the way to build.
Well, the conservative leader says the Trudeau government has focused housing policy on what Poilievre calls gatekeepers and red tape, which he says has led to delays in construction and a dramatic leap in home prices. At the same press conference, Poilievre says the union representing WestJet cabin crew should apologize for trying to silence free speech. Poilievre used the public announcement system to give a 45-second speech on Sunday night on board a WestJet plane that was headed to Calgary from Quebec City after the Conservative Party convention. After video of the speech circulated online, QP Alberta's local 4070 president said it was disappointing the airline allowed a politician to use the PA system and that cabin crew had no input in the decision. The union wanted WestJet and Poilievre to apologize for putting the cabin crew in that situation. Poilievre says he was asked multiple times by the cabin crew to speak, and the union should be the one apologizing. WestJet's CEO said Wednesday that the flight was specifically added to the schedule because of extra demand related to the convention and that most of the passengers were conservative delegates. The leaders of Manitoba's three main political parties are back on the campaign trail today in the lead up to the October 3rd provincial vote. NDP leader Wab Kinew says his party would reopen a healthcare center in Winnipeg that provided specialized care for menopausal women. Liberal leader Dougald Lamont has promised to let social assistance recipients keep more of their benefits as they transition to work. And Progressive Conservative leader Heather Stephenson is scheduled to make a campaign announcement this afternoon. Now, 5 years after 17 people died when a duck boat sank on a Missouri lake, the U.S. Coast Guard has issued new rules for the amphibious World War II vehicles retrofitted for tourist excursions. But the new rules have limited impact. Only 16 applicable vessels are still in use. The interim rules posted Monday require removal of window coverings and canopies, or installation of a canopy that doesn't keep passengers from escaping if the boat floods or sinks. They also include requirements for passengers to wear personal flotation devices, requirements for alarms and pumps, and they strengthen inspection regulations. But the rules only apply to repurposed World War II-era Army vehicles, not newer vessels. Now, similar vehicles are used here in Canada, with operators in Ottawa and Halifax. The long-running U.S. federal probe into Hunter Biden has taken a big step. The Associated Press's Sagar Mahani has more.
The president's son has been indicted on federal firearms charges, accused of lying about his drug use when he bought a gun 5 years ago. Hunter Biden had reached a plea deal that would include sparing him prosecution on a gun possession charge as he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor tax charges. But the deal fell apart in July. While defense lawyers argued that part of the agreement remains valid, prosecutors say otherwise. Hunter Biden's also under investigation for his business dealings and could still face tax charges. Sagar Magani, Washington.
Moving to sports now, where the Vancouver Canadians wrapped off the playoff road trip down in Everett, Washington. They played the Aqua Sox last night, but they lost 10-0. They were on a travel day now, but are set to play tomorrow and Saturday at Nat Bailey Stadium here in Vancouver. The Friday game starts at 7:05 Pacific time. The Jays are also back in action tonight versus the Texas Rangers after, a 10-0 blowout. The Rangers have won the first 3 games in the series. Kevin Gausman is expected to start for the Jays, and Nathan Eovaldi will counter for the Rangers. The new Professional Women's Hockey League will host its first player draft on Monday. Our very own Lachlan Irvin is here to break down the rules and what local connections the league has.
The PWHL draft is an expansion draft, filling out the inaugural rosters for the original 6 teams, 3 Canadian and 3 American, and the selection order will flip each round. The first overall choice belongs to Minnesota, who's expected to use it on college standout Taylor Heisey. Saanich Micah Zandy Hart is already one of the league's first official players. The 26-year-old defenseman signed with New York on Sunday, but there's plenty of Canadian stars still available, including Natalie Spooner, Erin Ambrose, and Emma Maltese. The PWHL draft kicks off on Monday. Lachlan Irvin, 1680, The Crow.
Over to tennis now, where in the Davis Cup, Vasek Popsal and Gabriel Danel won their single matches Thursday to give defending champion Canada a win over Sweden. Popsal's 25 service aces spurred the Canadian to a 7-6, 5-7, 6-2 victory over Leo Borg, followed by Datalo's 6-4 and 6-3 win over Elias Ymer in Bologna. Canada opened the 16-country group stage of the finals with a 3-0 win over host Italy on Wednesday. Canada defeated Australia in last year's final to win the biggest team event in men's tennis for the first time. Both countries earned byes to the group stage of this year's finals. The top two in each group advanced to November's finals 8 in Malaga, Spain. Back to baseball, where the Boston Red Sox fired Chief Baseball Officer Chaim Bloom on Thursday as the team stumbled towards a third-place finish in 4 seasons. Or a third-last-place finish in 4 seasons. The team made the announcement before the start of a doubleheader against the New York Yankees, who took the first 2 games of the series to drop Boston into a tie for last. Bloom was hired from the Tampa Bay Rays to help revive the farm system and bring on financial stability to a team that was one of baseball's biggest spenders. One of his first actions was to trade 2018 American League MVP Mookie Betts on a mandate from ownership to get the payroll in order. In Formula One news, Red Bull is trying to continue its season-long winning streak at this weekend's Singapore Grand Prix. In the last race in Monza, Max Verstappen broke the record for the most wins in a row, with 10. Despite Verstappen's dominance, he won't be able to win the championship this weekend, but can put himself within striking distance of his 3rd world title. Now, his teammate Sergio Perez says he's received a personal apology from Red Bull boss Helmut Marko over comments Marko made suggesting his heritage was to blame for inconsistent results on track. Marko described Perez as, quote, South American, and indicated that could explain a lack of focus or inconsistency in comments last week on an Austrian broadcaster, which is part of the Red Bull group. He later apologized publicly and said he had been wrong to make the link. It's currently 21 and sunny outside our studio in beautiful Burnaby, BC. It's a high of 24 today with the sun sticking around over the weekend. I'm Rich Davis from 1680 The Crow. Stay tuned for more news updates.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikki-King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikki-King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Please note that in this episode of For the Record, we will talk about suicide. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please call 1-800-784-2433. September is Suicide Prevention Month. The conversation around this topic is not an easy one, and more if someone you know is at risk of attempting suicide. This episode's guest, Lou Ripley, is the Director of Community Learning and Engagement at BC Crisis Center. Ripley has more than 30 years of experience on community development and health promotion. Part of her job is training people on how to recognize suicide warning signs. Let's hear on what she has to say on suicide prevention. With children going back to school and adults going back to the grind, how can people recognize in this environment suicide signs in their peers?
Sure. Well, thank you for asking. That's a really great question. How can people recognize? Well, there's a few things that I'd like to point out. One is that we can recognize by starting to kind of destigmatize or humanize suicide, to recognize that many people can struggle with suicide. It's sort of not one type of person. It's not shameful. And I think that often is one of the big barriers in our society, is that we think, oh, it's sort of this type of person, or people who this happens to, or, you know, it wouldn't really be something that would happen to this other kind of person who maybe you have, you know, there's certain judgments about that other person that wouldn't make them likely to think about suicide. So the reality is that we all know that anybody can have thoughts of suicide. That's the first step. And then the second step is to be aware of you know, maybe changes that you notice. You know, maybe the person, you know, for a long time seemed very bubbly, and then you notice a significant change in that behavior. Maybe they stopped doing things that they used to do. Maybe they say things to you like, I can't go on anymore, or I don't want to live. That could be an indication, right? We know that when people go through challenging times, they might say some of these things. And so we can be aware of them. So significant changes, things that someone says, and being able to notice these and even check in with somebody and say what you notice. You know, I noticed that, you know, it's been hard for you the past year. I haven't seen you come to the activities that you normally did. It seems like you're struggling, right? How are you doing? Like checking in with people and just seeing how they are.
Yeah, on the same line, when you started answering this question, you said about the stigmatized, and I wanted to ask you, how do you do that? How do you start opening the conversation, for example, in families, when parents sometimes have a hard time speaking about certain topics like sexuality or the topics? How do we open that conversation in houses, for example?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something we do training. We offer training for various community members because it's hard. You know, totally, I get it. I'm a parent. I get it. I think it's, for me, it's just sort of being aware that someone having thoughts of suicide doesn't mean that it's not something that we need to be completely afraid of. It might mean that someone's struggling and needs some help within a time of challenge. So trying to destigmatize in that way, to know that it's kind of this balance. We don't want to say, oh, you know, everybody struggles with it. It's no big deal. Just deal with it. And we also don't want to do this other opposite thing and say, oh my goodness, if someone's struggling with suicide, they need to, like, you know, be locked away, right? It's kind of like a balance, right? So noticing, being able to be aware that this is not just something that's happening to your family, for example. It's very much more common than that, and I think that can be really helpful for parents to keep in mind.
And once parents or peers recognize these signs, what are the next steps? What do you do? Like, what do you do after that?
Well, if you recognize that something's going on with someone and they're saying things to you, or you're noticing these changes, or you know, just kind of like, I don't want to live anymore, I can hardly go on anymore, I feel really stuck, there's no worth living, the thing is to kind of even just let the person know, I hear you saying, you don't want to live, and you're not playing soccer anymore, and I'm concerned. Like, again, that I'm concerned. Like, what's going on? Like, do you want to talk about it? And just sort of see what the person says, and to be able, and this is what we do in a lot of our training, to be able to even ask, like sometimes when someone says they don't want to live anymore, they're actually thinking maybe about not living anymore. Sometimes it's even linked to suicide. Is that something that you're thinking, right? So this ability to kind of notice it, to let someone know why you're asking, to name it, right? Very hard to do. I'm not saying it's easy. It can be hard. And it can be super helpful, right? That person feels seen and heard and validated, right? So we do recommend really just sort of exploring some of the things you're noticing and hearing, being able to, if you can, ask about suicide, or, I'll just share with you a story about someone who called me, and she was really worried about her son, and she couldn't bring herself to ask him. She was too fearful because she had suicide in her life. And so she reached out to her sister and said to her sister, can you check in with him? And can you make sure you ask him, right? So sometimes it means kind of reaching out to maybe others we have in our life to also check in with, and not trying to handle everything by ourselves.
Yeah, for sure it's a tough conversation to have with kids or everyone. But I was thinking nowadays we also have like this, we're talking more about mental health in more spaces. And I wanted to ask you about your perception. What are the things that we didn't know 10 years ago that we know now about the suicide prevention? Or what are the big changes that you're seeing in your environment, in your patients, when they speak about their problems, or the people that you train to recognize suicide signs?
What are we noticing as big changes in the last 10 years?
Yes. What are the biggest changes that you've seen in your workshops?
Right. I think people are acknowledging. I think there's less stigma, and I think that can be a good thing. I think people are aware that all of us have these these types of things in our families and our workplaces, and I do feel like there's less stigma and definitely more openness. I remember when 10 years ago, if I mentioned I worked in the field I worked at, people would just turn away. And now I do recognize that people are more curious, actually, and I know that people want to get more of the skills, and so we do notice that more and more people are coming out to get trained, like parents and workplaces, and just trying to gain more of the skills to be able to manage it. And I also think that people are recognizing, and this is great, that it's about a community response. This is not like an individual problem that one person can fix. Often it does require a community, so families involved, and maybe professional services are involved, and we have places like crisis centers that people can phone in, so that it's a real community effort.
Thank you, Lou. We're getting to the end of the interview, and I wanted to ask you, do you have any recommendations for the public, how they can access these resources, or how can they sign in for this workshops that you do?
Yeah, sure. So if you go to our website, Crisis Center of BC, we offer a variety of trainings, and one that I would highly recommend is something called Safe Talk. It's a half-day training, good for anybody 15 and older. It's a really wonderful training. It's very empowering. I know that's kind of crazy to say when you're talking about suicide, but it is. And that one of the other changes that we're moving into, and I think the Indigenous worldview for this, is we're reminding ourselves that life promotion is important, and so that means taking care of ourselves, right? And that means taking care of our community. So we build that into our suicide prevention training. So yeah, it's on our website. If there's an inability to pay, please do reach out, because we can make it affordable for you, or we just want people to come and get trained.
That was Lou Ripley from the BC Crisis Center. I'm Sebastián Arancibia, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
This is your 1230 news update on 1680 The Crow. I'm Zach Clark. Kelowna RCMP are still investigating an assault on a BC Transit bus, though one suspect is now in custody. A sick teen was verbally abused with racial slurs by two young adult males before the bus driver kicked all three off the bus. The two males then assaulted the sick teen with pepper spray before running away. Kelowna RCMP ask anyone with information to come forward. Chilliwack RCMP are investigating a double homicide on Chilliwack Lake Road that they suspect stemmed from a dispute between neighbors. A suspect has been taken into custody, but RCMP are asking anyone with more information to step forward. The double homicide comes less than 2 weeks after another shooting in the area, which police say are unlikely to be connected. Yesterday, the Vancouver City Council held a vote to increase multiple license fees. Riley Loom has the story.
On Wednesday, the City Council has proposed and voted on increasing business licensing fees, residential parking permit fees, and more. The most significant one is the short-term rental license, which will see an increase from $109 to a staggering $1,000. Though not finalized, the increase in licensing fees will be in Vancouver's 2024 budget plan. Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim explained that the increases were necessary to not up property taxes. The additional revenue will generate an extra $15.2 million for the city, making up a 1.4% property tax increase. Riley Lung, 1680 The Crow.
British Columbia is expanding the program that provides free post-secondary education for former youth in care. Post-secondary education minister Selena Robinson says the provincial tuition waiver program has had a massive effect on the lives of former recipients. She says that's why it's being expanded to all former youth in care and will no longer be capped at 27 or younger. The program, which has now been used over 2,300 times since its launch in 2017, now provides free tuition at all 25 of BC's public post-secondary institutions, the Native Education College, and union-based trades training courses. It also offers a $3,500 grant to cover books and other supplies. The new Professional Women's Hockey League will host its first player draft on Monday. Our very own Lachlan Irvin is here to break down the rules and what local connections the league has.
The PWHL draft is an expansion draft, filling out the inaugural rosters for the original 6 teams, 3 Canadian and 3 American, and the selection order will flip each round. The first overall choice belongs to Minnesota, who's expected to use it on college standout Taylor Heisey. Saanich Micah Zandy Hart is already one of the league's first official players. The 26-year-old defenseman signed with New York on Sunday. But there's plenty of Canadian stars still available, including Natalie Spooner, Erin Ambrose, and Emma Maltese. The PWHL draft kicks off on Monday. Lachlan Irvin, 1680 The Crow.
News now from the United States. Hunter Biden has been indicted on federal firearms charges. The indictment filed in Delaware says Biden lied about his drug use when he purchased a firearm in 2018 while addicted to crack cocaine. Hunter Biden has also been investigated for his business dealings. The special counsel overseeing the case has indicted tax charges, which could be filed in Washington or California. The indictment comes as Republicans pursue an impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden, in large part over Hunter Biden's business dealings. And a history-making experiment has just come to a close. For the last 2 months, a pig kidney has worked normally inside a brain-dead man. Surgeons at NYU Langone Health removed the pig kidney and returned the donated body to his family for cremation. The genetically modified kidney worked properly for the first month before showing small signs that rejection was forming. Doctors say, however, that the kidney's function returned with some simple medication changes. This trial could help as regulators decide whether to allow clinical trials of pig organs. And overseas, the Libyan death toll has soared up to 11,300 confirmed deaths, a huge jump from the previous number of 5,500. And apparently another 10,000 people are reported missing from the Libyan Red Crescent organization. That was your 1230 news update on 1680 The Crow. I'm Zach Clark.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.